And our number 6 team out of the Pac-12 is the USC Trojans coming in this year. Wow, talk about taking, Lincoln Riley year one, taking the college football world by storm, and then laying two, and I mean two giant eggs to end the season, losing and getting the bejesus kicked out of you in the Pac-12 title game. And then I know people are banged up. I know not everyone played, but USC, you can't lose to Tulane. You can't. Like, that can't happen. And all the good stuff that they did all year long, people would excuse the Utah loss in mid-October last year. 43-42 at Utah. People go, oh, okay. And then they lose the opener there. Man, Caleb Williams back. Caleb Williams is a beast. I don't want to hear any of this nonsense. Going into last year, we heard all of this Caleb Williams hate, that he couldn't read a defense. He wasn't a very good quarterback. And we're like, okay, yeah, we get it. Oklahoma fans, you can be sour as you want. I get it. You want to, if a guy leaves your team, it's the same thing as in the NFL. When a guy leaves your team, you always kind of kick him on the way out and be like, I really wasn't that good because he no longer plays for us. Caleb Williams is a damn good quarterback, man. He won the Heisman last year. This dude legitimately has a shot to win another Heisman. You take a look at 42 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, 4,500 yards, adds in another 10 touchdowns on the ground, 382 yards on the ground. Granted, yes, he lost Jordan Addison. He does get Taj Washington back this year. I do like him quite a bit. Mario Williams as well. He's interesting. A little undersized for me. That 5'9" size always kind of is a little bit hesitant, but really fresh. Our conversation for USC should really be about the defense. I would start with Kalen Bullock. At the end of the day, that's where my notes started with. Kalen Bullock, 6'3" safety, have 5 interceptions on the year. USC's defense was good only because they got a boatload of turnovers. They couldn't stop anybody, but if they did force a boatload of turnovers. You take a look at it, they wound up having a grand total of, I want to say 19. They had 19 interceptions. They recovered 9 fumbles. They had 28 turnovers last year. That's really, really good. And then on top of it, throwing 40 sacks. Yeah, that's a good team defense, but they didn't stop anybody. I don't know. Tell me where you're seeing USC.
I mean, they have a third great receiver there in Dorian Singer, so they have weapons. They're not going to have offensive players. Lincoln Riley's going to have loads of receivers. He's going to have loads of running backs. Caleb Williams is fantastic, all that. But I will never truly take a Lincoln Riley team seriously ever again until they prove they can play defense. Now, look, I'm just going to put this out there. Yes, the national championship game between Georgia and TCU was a laugher and a complete absolute beatdown. But if USC and that terrible defense went to the playoff and had to play Ohio State, Michigan, or Georgia, or TCU, they would have been giving up 45 or 50 points in any of those football games. And it wouldn't have even been funny. Caleb can't do it all by himself. Baker Mayfield, when he was there at Oklahoma, the reason why they lost to Georgia is that defense couldn't get off the field in the second half of the Rose Bowl. Lincoln Riley's teams cannot play defense. And until they actually figure that out and get some guys who can actually tackle and stop people consistently, you're going to be you're going to put up a bunch of numbers. You're going to be you're a paper champion. You're a hollow tiger. I'm not scared of you. You might have tons of Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. That's fantastic. But none of them have any true hardware from a team perspective. And that's your biggest problem. And that's what you have to get figured out at USC. You have every little thing you ever want right now. Even though Oklahoma is a blue blood of blue bloods, you're at USC, who's not a blue blood of blue bloods, and you're in Hollywood. You should have no trouble getting anybody. You went out and got Barry Alexander from Georgia. Maybe that's the big defensive tackle you need to really solidify that defensive line, start building that mentality of getting tough in the trenches and actually becoming a full-on football team and not a 7-on-7, flag football squad. You need to be physical at the line of scrimmage, and if you want to compete with even Utah, you've got to get tougher because didn't even compete with them in that football game. Yeah, Caleb was banged up, but you were getting dominated at line of scrimmage on every play. And that's Dan Lanning went to Oregon for a reason. He's getting talent up there. They're going to build players who are going to play defense and get after you. Utah's going to do it with Kyle Whittingham every single year. They're going to be tough, and they're going to be grinding it out. They're going to get you. And if you want to go to the Big Ten, and you want to play tough, good luck, because Michigan and Harbaugh, they got it going. Wisconsin's building a program. Ohio State's always got the dudes, and there's always guys at Iowa and Minnesota and Penn State and wherever they're going to be tough and eat you alive. You've got to get tougher if you want to compete at a high level. And this is more of a sometimes you might have to get rid of Alex Grinch. Get rid of him, clean house, but you've got to change your philosophy of being a better football team, being tough. And that starts in that line of scrimmage, offensively and defensively, and getting guys who want to tackle. Corey Freeman was the number 1 overall recruit 2 years ago, and the dude has what, maybe 12 tackles in his entire career? Let me look this up. In 2 years, Corey Freeman was the number 1 overall can't miss recruit, kid from California, 24 tackles and 2.5 sacks. In 2 years, you're the number 1 overall recruit, and you are doing nothing. That is underdeveloped. That is on the coaching staff for not getting a player to play, and he's not the only one. That's everyone on that roster. And until they start playing defense and being tough, they're not going to be like the Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush squad. And those dudes, they will light you up. Those guys all went to the NFL under Pete Carroll. That was legit men playing against boys. Right now, you don't have those defensive players who can step up and get you big stops on a national level. You might be able to beat up on the Stanfords and the Cals and the Arizonas, the Arizona States, but until you actually get yourself figured out, Lincoln Riley, on defense as a whole, your teams will never compete nationally, and you'll just be a name and a brand that'll be washing away, and in 4 years, you'll be fired because you haven't done anything. That's where you need to get your focus and squared away at, getting stops, being tough, being physical. The fancy pants offense will only get you so far. When the meat comes and the rubber hits the road, you've got to get grinded out and get stops on defense. You were giving up 400 yards total a game last year, and that was 7th in the Pac-12. It was terrible. You've got to improve this year, or you're going to be run out of town. Your schedule really begins October 14th, in my opinion, when you head to Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman's got that team playing a little better. They're tough. Can you go into South Bend and get a dub versus Notre Dame, big rival? If you can't, there's bigger. The red alarm should be going off right now that you don't have it all figured out at USC, and you're 1 year wonder. Your final 6 games, though, this is where it's all head. You can be 6-0 heading to Notre Dame. You got Utah at Cal, Washington at Oregon, UCLA. You need your team ready to go for the back half. We don't care what you do in September. You better be 6-0. If you're not, there's bigger issues. You've got to be able to be physical and grind it out and get stuff done when it matters. Because if you make the playoff, you're going to run into a Michigan or Ohio State or a Georgia or an Alabama or an LSU. You're going to run into a team that is built to withstand the punishment and be the punisher. And if you can't handle it, you're going to get embarrassed on a national level and you're going to get run out of town. This is a big year for you because you showed up last year, put up tons of points, got a Heisman Trophy winner, all is great. Now you actually need to start winning games at a national level that actually matter, not just in the Pac-12. The league is very tough. You've got to show up every single week. You've got to be smart and play balanced football. If not, you're destroyed. Can you do it with the talent? I think it's possible. Will you? That's the true question. Yes, this team could go 12-0. You could run through the entire schedule, make the playoff, and everything's great. And your floor could be 9-3. So ceiling undefeated regular season, floor 9-3. But it really comes down to, can USC get a defense, and can you actually prove that you're truly a tough football team?
They got in the transfer portal Marshawn Lloyd. I'm with you on Foreman. Foreman needs to be better. Defense as a whole, just everyone needs to be better on defense there. If they can continue, they can hide a lot of issues if they can continue to force turnovers. If they can be opportunistic and do that, you're gonna hide it, and you'll be viewed as one of the top teams in college football all year long. The scary part is exactly like you said, Fresh, is when you get into the playoff or you get into those New Year's Day 6 games and then you wind up getting boat raced in those games because your defense is not at that level. Like, are you going to be good enough to get to that level? Take a look at a guy like Shane Lee coming back. Like, he good linebacker right there. Are these guys able to really put in what's going to be required of them going into this season? You're right. The ceiling for them is 12-0. That end of the season, granted, they have that early on. This team's going to probably roll to 6-0 very, very easily. And it's going to set up a huge game against Notre Dame that second week of October in South Bend. Notre Dame's got some big games this year, especially with who they're matched up with: Ohio State, Clemson, and USC. There's some really interesting games that we're going to be tuned in for. But you follow that trip, and host Utah, who has had your number back-to-back years. Like, are you going to be able to come down such a rivalry game to a team that's really just taking you to the woodshed every single year so far? And then you look at how they end the season. They end with Washington, at Oregon, and then UCLA in the Coliseum and not in the Rose Bowl. Again, home game for both of those teams, in my opinion. And then they're off Thanksgiving weekend. I know that they start early in that week 0 thing, but it really sucks that they're off that weekend of Thanksgiving, because depending on how a lot of those rivalry games go is going to really determine what we think of this USC team. I mean, you're right. 12-0 is the ceiling. I mean, worst case scenario, if you're talking to me, what's the worst possible case scenario? Now, I don't foresee this happening, but 8-4. 8-4 is their worst case scenario to me. 12-0, I think that this is a anything and everything is on the table in between. We're going to see, because if defense is not better, we know it's fascinating. I'm interested to see. I hope Sam Hartman's got a connection with his wide receivers for that week, the October 14th game against the Irish, because that could really get interesting. And we know what Bo Nix and Washington carries. I don't know, Fresh. I really don't. I think that this is a tough road to go for USC, but the expectations are high. So, yeah, that's where I see with USC, man. I don't know. I really don't with USC.
Well, and you look, right now we're talking about the expectations for USC. The reason why Lincoln Riley was hired out there is not really to win the Pac-12 or even really to win the Big 12. It is to win a national championship. And as we've seen, you don't have to win your conference to get in the 4. And obviously now we're expanding out to 12 in a couple of years. But you have to be tougher to win those games against the elite national competition. And that's where Lincoln Riley, every year, they look great, but they don't play defense. And if he can actually figure that out, and sometimes you got to maybe fire guys who are your friends to get someone to light a fire in there and make a play and get the defense better. But that's the only way that USC is actually going to be successful under Lincoln Riley is if they actually play legitimate